Hi everyone, my name's Will. I'm the manager for customer success for the European region here at UpGuard. I'm delighted to welcome you to the panel discussion this morning. We're going to be diving into cyber security risk management best practices. And today I have with me Nomfundo from Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. Hi, Nomfundo.
Hi, very well, thanks.
And we have Abhi from Teneo in the UK.
G'day, Will. G'day, guys.
Amen. And we have Thibault from Scorpio Group.
Hello, everyone.
If you're watching live today, you can join in the conversation, adding comments and questions in the chat, and we'll see if we can answer any questions towards the end of the panel event. So if we crack on without further ado, let's just start off with some quick fire introductions. Nomfundo, could you just let us know your background, your path to cybersecurity, your current role, and the importance of sort of cybersecurity to CCBA?
Thank you, Will. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nomfundo Ndlanya. I am the Risk and Compliance Manager for Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. I've been in IT for about 13 years now in various roles, predominantly within the FMCG space. It's actually in about 10 years ago where I was introduced to cybersecurity or more the risk aspects of IT, which is when I actually started working with the likes of a consulting company, KPMG, where we got exposed to this kind of environment. And I sort of just yielded off of it for quite a while and came back at it with now that I'm with Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, which has been quite a learning curve and extremely interesting. So what I've really been enjoying the most about being in IT security is that it gives you a good balance between working with the technical teams, but it also still calls for your business partnering skills, where you still need to work quite closely with your business and manage IT from that aspect. So for me, it's something that is continuously evolving, which then keeps us on our toes and keeps everything interesting and keeps you learning and growing. So for me, those are the key things that have really drawn me to security and have really kept me there thus far.
Yeah, it's an ever-changing industry. Thanks, Nomfundo. Thibault, to you. What's your background? What was your path to cybersecurity? Your current role and the importance of cybersecurity within Scorpio Group?
Thank you. So I'm Thibault Millant. I'm the Information Security Officer for Scorpio Group. Previously, I started as a penetration tester for the airline industry or the travel industry, let's say, mostly focusing on web application security penetration testing and additional penetration testing in general. Then I moved to Scorpio to take in charge the responsibility of the various cybersecurity aspects from technical up to penetration testing when I have time, because it's quite interesting and keeps you up to date with the various threats, to governance and functional security, including the vessel security part. We have seen a lot of evolutions in the last 10 years in cybersecurity, and I believe for all of us, it's important to remain up to date. We see emerging threats and technologies related to third party, related to AI, and I'm pretty sure we will have a very insightful discussion to cover these topics today.
Yeah, cool. Thanks very much, Thibault. And Abhi, your background, your path to cybersecurity, current role, and the importance of cybersecurity to Teneo?
Absolutely. My name's Abhi Arora, and I look after everything information security at Teneo, which is a consultancy advisory firm operating across the globe, 1,200 odd clients and 41 offices as of last count. What's brought me into cybersecurity was effectively the fact that the field is it's never kind of 2 days are the same. Every day is a new day, and effectively there's more to learn and more to kind of see on a daily basis, which is it's a huge draw card. And it's kind of one of those places where the job is never really done. You never know what's around the corner, and effectively, with kind of shifting sands, you're always having to look quite far ahead and kind of bring together a lot of business elements as well as IT elements, and kind of really bring that together. So I find that really appealing in the role. My track to cybersecurity so far, effectively, I've spent about a decade working with PwC across the global information security function, a variety of business-facing roles as well as internal-facing roles, and then wound up over at Commonwealth Bank before making the jump over here to Teneo. The role at Teneo and effectively the importance of Teneo cybersecurity is that we want to ensure that our clients receive a secure operating environment when they trust us with their vital data. And the great thing is there's an awesome tone at the top, and security is really well considered in the organization.
Cool. Thanks very much, Abhi. If we just take a deeper dive into the third-party risk management strategies, Thibault, how do you prioritize and manage third-party risk in your organization, and sort of what do your processes look like at the moment?
Managing third-party risk has been quite an exciting and somehow challenging journey. One of the motivation was the increase of attacks against third party that was compromising bigger entities. I always give the example of British Airways, for example, a website that leaked a lot of credit cards because they used a piece of code from a third party that got compromised. And very recently, we had a group called Econocom that was also compromised due to one of their third-party consultant assets. So it's something that is absolutely critical today. We all come from apparently some very big company, probably leaders in their industries, and we invest in cybersecurities. Like Abhi used to say, we have investing a lot, and it might be more difficult to compromise companies like ours than the companies that our parties, the companies that we are getting involved with or making business with. So we had to create processes in order to deal with that. And it's very difficult. It takes a lot of time if you want to deeply evaluate a third party. If you want to deep dive, you need a lot of resources. And we found, obviously with UpGuard, but in general, having this risk approach based on what you expose as a company, a very good insight on the quality of what could be. Obviously, it can lie, let's say, because you can hide behind a very good front desk, for example, a very bad security approach. But let's say that at least if you know that the front desk is clean, seems secure, there's chance that the back part will also be. And that's why using the risk score provided by UpGuard with the vendor risk management has been very useful in Scorpio in order to start evaluating. And based on the criticality of the party, based on the type of access that they will require, we can move to something more in depth in terms of analysis. But to get an oversight, it really helped us implement a third-party risk management approach.
Yeah, sure. So the public-facing attack surface of a third party at least gives you an indication of sort of
Definitely.
security posture. Abhi, what are your thoughts? Sort of, have you seen certain strategies work well and anything that doesn't work so well?
Absolutely. Look, I think for us as a consultancy advisory firm, we've got teams obviously looking to be nimble, agile, and kind of provide services in the best and most efficient manner possible to their clients. And that involves using cutting edge technology, which as a security administrator, it adds to the challenge. Effectively, you are now not just vetting brand names, you're bringing your lens across companies which may have only been operating for a shorter amount of time, are using cutting edge technologies like AI, and effectively ensuring that they're delivering new types of tools into the market. And the business is always very keen to kind of implement these tools. So effectively, what we've seen work really well is front ending our requirements as an organization. So we make it very clear to the business that these are the requirements when you want to partner with an organization, you want to utilize a specific tool. They're not kind of flying blind. They don't get very excited and kind of bring a tool to you that is being run out of a basement somewhere with no credentials, no certifications, and then be disappointed when it doesn't really pass muster. So we kind of like to front end those requirements, and then we bring in a partnership model where the business, legal, and procurement are all taking a unified approach to reviewing an entity that is presented by the business, and effectively, raising that in a forum model. UpGuard's been really positive for us to allow various stakeholders to collaborate around the sense of security reviews. It allows for everyone to kind of take a look at what the end party has submitted, and it allows us to kind of automate and streamline a number of those things, which has been a really positive uplift to our process.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so a kind of broad collaboration and business acceptance of the processes and communication of those throughout the business, right? Nomfundo, how have you found managing third-party risk, and what policies and strategies have you put in place within CCBA?
So from our end, we've been doing quite a lot of groundwork because as CCBA, we heavily rely on third parties for executing a lot of functions within our company. So we've been doing a lot of groundwork in terms of understanding our vendors, trying to consolidate where we can. So we understand the service that they're offering, understanding the kind of data that they're accessing, the kind of platforms they're accessing, and what data they're actually processing as well. And then where we see opportunities in terms of service where we can consolidate, we've been doing that. So we can actually have at least one vendor manage a particular service across all the African markets that we look after. So that's one of the key strategies that we've been looking at in terms of third-party risk management, in terms of how we can narrow down that risk and attack surface by narrowing the number of vendors that actually are accessing CCBA systems. But likewise, like Abhi and Thibault has also mentioned, that we definitely do our third-party risk assessments as well, making use of the UpGuard tool and looking at what the digital footprint actually looks like and matching that to say, okay, this actually speaks to what they've responded in terms of the risk assessments. And then we obviously also bring them along on the journey, because what we are still trying to navigate is that once we obviously get an output from these assessments and output from all the tools that we're using in terms of what our vendors actually look like, how do we then move forward from that? So we bring them along on the journey as to say, this is what our expectations are, this is what we are doing as CCBA, because we all generally have more or less the same risks that we're managing. And this is what we would recommend, because we need to get to the point where having identified any risks, we now start remediating and closing those gaps. So we've been honing quite a bit on how we actually get to the point where our vendors remediate. We're also dealing with a lot of vendors that are still small companies. So we have to be mindful of those kind of dynamics and mindful of the kind of investments that they would then have to make in the efforts of remediating any issues. So it's still a journey. But I'm interested to hear how the other companies are also managing it. How do we hold our vendors accountable or to a certain standard, which is in effect mutually beneficial? But how do we get there? For me, is the key thing that I'm quite interested in. Would like to hear from the panel as well.
Yeah, like Thibault, how would you sort of police? I'm going to use the term police, but how would you police your vendors, or to try and ensure they remediate the risks that you've kind of highlighted?
I found it very interesting what Nomfundo was saying. The mutual benefits of it is not always understood, especially I believe when you don't work, well, your third party are not necessarily IT companies. Most of us in IT, we cannot, let's say, do without cybersecurity. It's something that is considered almost by default. We talk about cybersecurity by design, etc. So it's usually well into the processes, or at least most of the IT companies understand the benefits of it. It's more difficult when you are in an industry that is not IT based or IT centric, like Nomfundo, or like us at Scorpio, where we deal with vessels, we deal with everything that is around the vessels, and we sometimes face the issue where you have one of your third party that is a port agent, and where the only materials that he owns is a computer. So very limited assets, very limited security, and you still need to find the right trade-off in order to keep working, because in some cases, for some business reasons, you have to work. It cannot be an argument to say, okay, if you don't comply with the baseline that UpGuard is providing and that we are relying on, we will not continue our collaboration. In some cases, you are forced to, and that's where you need to educate. You need to also make distinction between a company, even a non-IT company, that is having resources to elevate the level of security, to improve the security posture, and company where you will only do a basic check, such as you have an antivirus and it's up to date. And I found the way UpGuard has been designed or made is, for me, one of its strengths, is the fact that it's collaboration oriented. And it's very easy as a, let's say, UpGuard client to use the solution to improve our third party posture, share the information with them, organize the remediations in a way that will be beneficial for all of us, making them understand also the fact that we use a rating that is publicly accessible for the UpGuard customers. It's also a good way to influence the investment, or at least the actions, toward a better cybersecurity posture.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think that's something that comes across that within UpGuard, of having that kind of community that, with providing scores and just general cybersecurity information, if that uplifts the security of sort of all organizations, everyone in the end benefits, with more individually more cybersecurity and more secure kind of vendors and third parties and fourth parties. Abhi, what are your thoughts over that sort of engagement with vendors and how you manage those relationships?
Absolutely, and Thibault's really valid points there, and Nomfundo really kicked that off really well, and it got me thinking. There are situations where the business has a specific need, and as security, you can't be seen as the no police at all point in time. So effectively, it comes down to a balanced discussion of really being able to set a nuanced approval standard where we will go back to the business and say, whilst we're not providing you the green light at this point in time, we've got a list of 10 measures that if the vendor can implement by set dates, effectively it will allow for them to move towards that green light approach. Being able to explain to the business in a jargon-free format, what each risk actually means in practice. Having weak ciphers doesn't necessarily mean anything to the business. But when you put it into context and outline to them, we are trusting them with Teneo network access or with our confidential client data. If that were to be breached, regulatory penalties, reputational penalties, etc., and really kind of help them come to the party, understand that this is their data that you are helping them protect, has always been very useful for us, because then it becomes more of a team sport, and kind of bringing in non-technical stakeholders to the security space. It results in them not feeling like it's us versus them. It's more of we're all in this together, and effectively we're looking to provide our clients a secure service, and this is just how we're going to do it. So I found that that's been really useful for us. And to Thibault's points, utilizing the UpGuard platform to kind of use that as the hosting ground for documentation and kind of holding those risks has been vital for us, I'd say.
I like that. I like that when the conversation is more from a risk-based opinion, as opposed to this is what we want and you're not delivering. So I definitely like that. But I think what's also important is that we also need to be in a position where we are able to sort of quantify the value that the service or this third party brings, and what would it mean for the organization should we do without, and also understanding what the options actually are, and also just from a continuity perspective, because you need to look at your own business continuity, but you also need to look at your third party's continuity ability, and resilience as well. So I think if both parties understand that, they understand the impact that they have on your organization and what it would mean to be without that service, I think that will also really, I guess, change or drive the conversation in a better direction, so that they actually understand, the value that they bring in. It's not so transactional in terms of we're bound by the contract and SLAs and you pay me for this, etc. And I think those also one of the things that actually then contribute to having a good relationship with your vendors as well.
Yeah.
We're also touching. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Thibault.
We're also touching, we talk about risk and risk management. I believe people or the companies that will start investing in a solution like UpGuard start also to have a mature approach. And risk management is, I believe, one of the key in cybersecurity to become a mature company with proactive processes. It's very easy, and I believe most of the, let's say, cybersecurity administrator or people working in cybersecurity, it's very easy to recommend antiviruses, firewall, and administrate them. And that's probably the basic. Today, seems difficult to think that a company can be protected without some basic solutions in order to reduce the risk, even if at that time it's not really seen or presented as a risk. It's a must-have to follow the best practices. And then when you start investing in looking at your public attack surface, looking at what you expose, discussing what is worth remediating or what is not meant to be remediated, we start to talk about risk. And the best way to discuss with the business of the senior management is to define risk and define the risk strategy and obviously the risk acceptance of the company. And I try personally, I remember during the training, the trainer was telling that it's not worth remediating something or remediating a risk if the value of the asset is not as big as the value of the risk. And that's something we need to consider when we expose the risk, is how much the asset is worth and what the risk, if it's exploited, if it succeeds, will cost us. And keeping that in mind, I believe we start to be even more, let's say, mature, because we have a quantitative approach, which is often well understood by the business.
Yeah. So for me, I was going to lead on to another question, sort of related, but for smaller companies that maybe don't have the team, don't have the budgets, what would be your advice for starting off a third-party risk management program if it's not very mature for smaller companies?
I can probably take a go at that one, Will, because we kind of, when I joined Teneo, we took a completely fresh approach to revamping the program. And I think the way we kicked things off is that we worked on a prioritization level. Effectively, we tried to gauge what is the level of access or what is the value of the data that this third party is going to hold. And we effectively look to prioritize based on our highest value vendors in the first instance, and then kind of work our way down from there. We took a look at who had what certifications and kind of who was an established player in the market, kind of assigned ratings from that side of things. All of this kind of being publicly available information, you can easily gauge what an A-tier vendor looks like and kind of work down from there. But I found dedicated time and effort to looking at where the highest risks were. Exactly as Thibault has been saying, it's taking that risk-based approach that can easily be understood by upper management as well as your business stakeholders tends to play well. And having the highest tiers spending kind of effort and intensiveness there is going to yield you the biggest results as a small business that has a kind of a smaller range of resources to dedicate to third-party risk management.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Abhi.
No, I agree with Abhi, but I also think that it's again, it goes back to the kind of conversations you're having with the vendors. if you are big or small, that you're still faced with the same kind of risk. Cybersecurity is still a risk for you. It's probably even worse for you if you're even a smaller company. But I think the key thing that we always need to look at, especially if you're a smaller company, is how do you come back from it? Because then your investments can be based on that. How do you continue to be resilient as a company? And also, how do you then, what does your BCP look like? What does your DRP look like? So I think those would be the important conversations to have with them. And I say BCP because we shouldn't always look to a particular technology. Where possible, we should look at how we can even continue manually with what we actually already have on hand, if you're a small company. And because BCPs also do become quite important. I mean, even for big companies, if you're in a position where you have a certain outage, your BCP does kick in. So I think it's doing that groundwork in terms of understanding your risk and putting relevant controls in place. And not all controls are technical controls. So they should look at what is in their power and what it is that they can also then obviously work on and implement, and then build on that and then mature on that basis. But I don't think, though, the conversation should always be a case of, oh no, we are a small company, we can't make the investment. I mean, you're faced with the exact same risk. So we need to start looking at how we can develop from that, and how also your partners can support you, those that you are providing a service to, how they can also support you in that, how, like, learn from them, at least, so you can understand in terms of, these are the basics, these are the things that you need to have in place, and then how you can obviously develop a plan. It doesn't have to be overnight. It can be a 3-year, 5-year plan, and work together with your partners in that. And then that's how you could actually also start building your security posture as a small company.
That's cool. Thanks, Nomfundo. I was going to move on to a slightly different question, unless anyone wants to add any more on that topic.
No, please go ahead.
We've spoken previously about staying compliant and rules and regulations, compliance across different countries and across different borders. There's what people countries operating internationally. How do you manage that? And how do you track changes with regulations and compliance? And how does that affect your business? Thibault, do you want to go first?
That's a complex topic, let's say, also because some of the regulation are not so easy to understand for IT people. And again, the scope or the approach is different if you have a big company or if you are part of a smaller company. It's important to make sure all the actors are well aware of what needs to be tracked, because some regulation will be related to laws, especially if you are expanding, for example, in new locations. Some regulation will be related obviously to the business. We have IT regulation, we have the GDPR that is progressively evolving and has been released. For example, India just released and approved its version of the GDPR. So we need to have people or solutions. And usually, I've always been told we need people, processes, in order to implement what needs to be done and track the changes. People, process, and technologies come together. That's the challenge. Regulations are changing very quickly, probably evolve as quickly as cybersecurity threats evolve, and it's a challenge to remain updated. At Scorpio, we have people that are focusing on the different regulation, GDPR, that today we have TPOs in a lot of companies, for example. Our legal department is also involved in helping us to track what is important, as well as the business. I believe some of the industry will have a lot of audits that force you to remain updated, and it's good because most of the time in this situation, you also have organization that provides the standard in a, let's say, easy way to track. But again, you need the resources and the tool to help you achieve this.
Thanks, Thibault. Nomfundo, sort of operating as you are in Africa, how does that affect you with sort of multi-regional compliance, multi-regional vendors?
Yeah, so we lean on a lot from our privacy office and from our business stakeholders who closely manage changing regulations and compliance issues around or across Africa. What our approach generally is, we look at it from a RACM perspective, which is our risk matrix, risk and control matrix. So we often review those because we're always looking for opportunity as to say how we can put in any technical controls where we can. So for example, when we're speaking around where and which data we actually retain, so we look at that various controls that we can put in place from an IT perspective that speaks directly to the policies that we've implemented or that we have for data retention. So we basically manage it from that perspective, as to say we include it in our RACM, so it's something that we constantly have oversight on, and it's something that we're constantly engaging our business partners across the markets to understand the changing landscape. And there is quite a bit of change because with a lot of the African countries, we're now coming up more with their own privacy laws and kind of shifting away from GDPR, but rather implementing their own regulations and laws as each country. So it's been quite a journey because we've been seeing quite a number of that actually really coming up and emerging. And then we obviously need to manage the different requests or requirements that come from that. Also from an audit perspective, we find that then we'd have certain requirements that particular countries would have audits within those countries, irrespective of us having a general audit across the group itself. So it is something that requires us to just really keep a finger on the pulse so that we are in close contact with our business to understand those changing dynamics, and then always looking at it from a risk and control perspective in terms of how then as IT, we can actually manage that effectively.
Thanks, Nomfundo. Do the changing scope and the fines involved in sort of breaches, does that affect your strategies, Abhi? Maybe specifically like the ICO in the UK and in Europe with very high fines for data loss. How does that affect your strategy?
Absolutely. Look, our strategy at Teneo is it's a very consultative strategy. Effectively, we work in step with our privacy and legal colleagues, with clients dotted across the world. Effectively, we have to keep track of effectively the kind of entire world landscape when it comes to tracking changes. It does involve a lot of reading and a lot of discussions. Effectively, we've got a number of kind of keyword searches teed up, and we've got a number of sources that we rely on, but it does primarily, as an IT stakeholder, come down to the information that's fed across. That tends to involve, for such a huge task, it tends to fall on the shoulders of our colleagues that are a little bit more capable in the field, and that digest is kind of passed through to us to allow us to kind of implement the various elements of that updated regulation when it does kind of click through. So for us, it is more of a sit and wait approach. It sounds like it's a little bit different here as compared to what Nomfundo and Thibault are talking through. But for us, the kind of the fines on the other end, will, that it does add to the business case for security. I think that's a really positive thing where it makes that return on investment discussion just a little bit easier, where there's a clear model of effectively, if we don't secure X data to the best of our capability, this is the consequence. Whereas previously in security, it was more of a theoretical discussion. There was no hard figure to point to and basically draw that X equals Y conclusion. So I think that's been really positive for someone in the security space. It allows non-technical stakeholders to clearly understand the consequences of a failure to kind of behave appropriately in the security space.
Yeah, you can sort of quantify the risk.
There's one aspect that I believe is also important. We are mentioning fines. At the end, compliance against the various regulation has to be considered as a risk. And if the effort, the cost of implementing what is required to prevent the fine has to be evaluated. And if it's too high, we may think of not fully complying with the regulation and keep us exposed to the risk and to the fine. Sorry, keep us exposed to the fine. That's a balance. There's one exception when we don't have the choice because it's by law that we have to fulfill this obligation. So some company might not reduce the risk as much as possible regarding GDPR or other regulation because they believe that they can absorb the fine after proving that they have still done something, but not up to the maximum level. That's something that makes it also difficult, but it's also a way to talk about the business. We are always often seen as security officer as people that are sometimes blocking the business. And if you consider, if you change your mind, or at least if you consider this aspect, that regulation is a risk like a natural disaster, you also change the way you approach this type of obligation and how you engage with the business. So I believe it's very useful to keep that in mind when you deal with regulation.
That's great. Thanks very much, Thibault. I was just going to ask a couple of questions we've got from the audience at the moment. We've got one here. What are the emerging trends and future challenges in third-party risk management that organizations should be prepared for? Nomfundo, do you want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, I can have a crack at that. But I'm not sure what I'm going to raise as anything new. But for us, the key issue or thing to really look out where third parties are concerned is how you manage access. For us, it's really been a key focus and a key area of concern. Because we find ourselves in a position where we have so many third parties, and in as much as we have a repository of them, we know who they are, we know what they do, but it's also just managing in terms of these third parties come with teams, to assist you in certain services that they provide. So it's managing and knowing who within these third-party companies has access to what and what exactly are they doing with the CCBA data, and what happens when these individuals leave these third parties. How do we actually manage that access? Because now it's almost spilling over. So you're not only just looking at CCBA access that you're managing, but you're sort of like, in a sense, also managing your third parties access as well, and understanding who is coming and going within your third parties and who are their fourth parties as well. So for us, the biggest issue or the biggest thing that we need or have been paying focus on is how we actually manage access. What policies do we then put in place, and how do we hold them accountable to that, to the extent of that, as we all know, as we all may have JML processes, joiner, mover, leaver processes. We've actually started designing one specific to third parties, which will be a process that they actually follow. So we have a better handle in terms of who is coming and who's going within these teams, because also depending on the kind of service that you get from them, it's not always one person that gets allocated to you or to work with. It's always a team of people that you would probably log issues to, and then they would attend to that. So for us, the key thing to really manage is really how we manage that access and the kind of data, which also then sparks conversations within CCBA as well, as to say we need to also start looking at certain technologies and DLPs, for example, as to how then we manage having confidential and sensitive information from leaving our environment because of this threat from the third parties, and not being able to have a good handle on who has access to what and how your data is actually moving and how and who is processing it. So it's those kind of conversations we've been having, and it's those kind of things that we've been keeping an eye on, as to say, let's also look at certain technology that can protect our data and look at investing in DLP solutions and the kind and the options that we actually have, being a Microsoft house as well.
Sure. Yeah, so very much kind of holistic approach.
The good thing that I see from what you said, Nomfundo, and I'm really aligned with what you say, is that the cybersecurity principle over the years are still the same at the end. Unfortunately, or the negative aspect, that they apply to more complex processes or more complex technology. You mentioned about the access. I was thinking about the identity and access management. That is probably one of the hot topic that has started to evolve in the last couple of years. That is based on the least privilege, which is one of the fundamental principles of cybersecurity. DLP, data protection, is obviously a very, very important topic, but it's probably as important as it is complex today. And it's based on the need to know principle. This is one of the big principle in cybersecurity. And so that's positive. At least we see that the logic behind the work that we are doing remains years after years. Unfortunately, it also becomes more and more complex. And DLP is probably the best example to highlight this. Managing DLP, I don't know if you have already completely implemented it, or if you have not done it, or if you have started to do it, but it's a big project. You need to know exactly your processes, the type of data that are meant to be used, who is supposed to access it, follow the evolution of the employees, the external parties that are accessing to it. It's a very interesting project, but it's very complex, and it's probably one of the challenge. And we have seen a couple of solutions that are today helping using AI model. And I believe that's my personal opinion, but in the future, we will need to rely on more AI-based solution to help achieve the same objective, considering the amount of data that we are now collecting and let's say computing.
You touched on AI there as a positive aspect to helping with cybersecurity. Do you see that as a potential emerging risk as well?
I believe we have already seen it as a potential, it's not a potential, but as an emerging risk. ChatGPT has been, let's say, modified or copied in order to be dedicated to, for example, phishing email creation. So as we have seen, something that another example that I like is we all know about YAS, PAS, SAS, but we have also started to see what I call RAS, ransomware as a service. So all these technologies that are very good when they are well used and deployed can also be used for the worse. And that's why I believe it's very important, even if it can be very complex. It's very important as cybersecurity, let's say, workers or subject matters experts. We need to embrace AI. We need to understand how it works, and we need to use it because the attackers will not hesitate to use it. They have already started to use it, and it goes so fast. It's so powerful compared to what our brains, our mind, and even our community can do. It can be also so powerful that we need to follow up with this topic. We need to start as soon as possible, because the more we wait, the more work will have to be done to catch up with the evolution developed by the AI.
So I think it goes back to the conversation that we had about the risk. So risk is always there. Everything is a risk. But again, we need to be in a position where you've quantified that risk. So you understand in terms of the real threat that it actually really poses, as opposed to the value that you can get from a particular technology or a new process that you're looking at implementing. Because yes, to Thibault's point, there is quite a lot of value that can be that we can derive from Gen AI. But at the same time, that risk still remains in the sense of how do we manage what our employees are sharing? How do we manage what our employees are uploading on these tools? For that ease of workload, etc. But the risk is definitely there, but the opportunity is also still there as well. So it's a matter of quantifying both and then understanding what your risk appetite or tolerance looks like as a company.
Well, that's fantastic, Nomfundo. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to wrap up because we've run out of time. Really do appreciate your time today, guys. Thank you so much, Nomfundo, Abhi, Thibault. Appreciate you, the conversation. It's been fantastic. Thanks to everyone who's watched today. Thanks to everyone who's joined the summit. And the summit next time round will be in December for UpGuard. Thanks to everyone. Thanks again to the panelists. Thank you very much.